All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Tracy Mansour in marketing for Randstad Sourceright. We're very pleased to have you join us today for our next Talent Navigator webinar. And today's title is See Robots and Recruiters in Action. Pretty dynamic title, and we think this is going to be a very dynamic presentation. I'm going to introduce one of my esteemed colleagues, Michelle Stocktis, and we'll let you know that he's going to be today's moderator. Michelle is actually our Managing Director for Randstad Sourceright's Talent Innovation Center. He is based in our global headquarters in the Netherlands, but joins us today from meetings in Dallas, Texas. So we're glad to have Michelle here in the U.S. this week, and very glad to have our guest experts who will be presenting. So Michelle, without further ado, I'm going to let you introduce our agenda and our first guest speaker. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and it's a privilege to be here in lovely Dallas. Although it's a bit colder than I was hoping for, but it's great to be here. Really looking forward to today's session as you introduced seeing robots and the recruitment technologies combined in action. I think we are pleased to have both Drew and Bill with us, and also showing and demonstrating some of the key features and functions that their core technologies will offer to us. I think it's a great opportunity, and as we have been running the Talent Navigators webinar series now a few times, I think it's just a great opportunity to head below the skin and really dive into the value add of these technologies. So what is going to be really interesting, hopefully for you all, is that when we look at the objectives and essence the key takeaways for you all in this current Talent Innovation Lab session that we have, is that it will provide you both through the technologies that Drew will demonstrate, and Wade and Wendy, and also Bill will showcase through the Montage technology suite. It really gives you a practical insight in how AI and automation can help you to increase your speed to talent, and so the outreach to talent, but also in a way that it really allows you to think about building a very personalized tech and touch, almost a one-to-one, real strong collaboration between leveraging state-of-the-art technologies, but at the same time really think about that touch element. How can we make sure that we really drive candidate engagement and candidate satisfaction, and ultimately that will bring the value to the organizations and to our clients. We have shown, and this is again will be visual to you, that it has really a big uptick and big benefit in increasing candidate engagements. Last but not least, but at the same time, I think it also will allow you to really understand how using these technologies can help you to scale up and create efficiencies and effectiveness across your end-to-end recruitment operations and workflow, and ultimately deliver the impact that you are looking for. So that's the intent. What you will see at the bottom of the webinar is a number of these bowls. With that also you will see in the middle that small clouds, that balloon that pops up. If you have any questions, you can use that and then go in the chat function to raise any of your questions. I think that's probably the best way. We will try to respond to as much as we can any of those questions. So let's dive in. So before we go into the first session, let me take I'm going the wrong way, excuse me there. Let me make sure that I introduce Drew Austin. Drew, and we know each other for a few years now, is not only the co-founder and CEO of Wade and Wendy, but as I would say very much a seasoned HR technology and venture startup expert who has been through a number of endeavors. And I think working with him, it really is impressive to see how he's using AI and using the deep technology capabilities to go over and beyond in this area of what we sometimes call the chatbots. If we talk about chatbots, I think what Wade and Wendy has to offer and will show and demonstrate is probably the next level of quality, the next level of depth and experience and value that it brings. So Drew, really pleased to have you join us here. And if you are okay, then I would say kick it off and show us the beautiful Wade and Wendy.
Thank you very much. So let's see, I'm the presenter now. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. I'm the CEO and founder of Wade and Wendy. And just to echo a couple things that I think Michelle brought up was, I think that personalization and scalability is definitely a key point of what we try to focus on and emphasize. And I think that's one of the major benefits of introducing AI into the workflow of recruiting. And the last piece, I think, is tech and touch. The second piece is tech and touch. This is it's really the best way to get success with AI. I'm sorry, I'm having some people say they can't hear me well. Okay. Let me know if there's any issues with my sound, but the best way to get benefits out of artificial intelligence within the recruiting space is really around how to figure out how to build a collaborative workflow and process between humans and the machine. So hopefully we can touch on that a little bit today. Okay. All right, so a little bit about Wade and Wendy. So we've been building AI recruiters for the past few years now, and what we've done is we've built a platform, a conversational system that enables and powers our AI recruiters to have various different types of conversations with the focus to source and find candidates, to engage and have conversations, and then recommend talent to recruiters and hiring managers in a scalable yet personalized way. So the core capabilities, there's three core responsibilities that really Wendy delivers upon when she's brought into a new organization, and we'll touch on those three today. So starting with sourcing, to talk through what she does, at a high level, she focuses on finding and building pipelines of job seekers from all over the web, generating personalized outreach messages, engaging those job seekers and informing them about opportunities, and then finding out if they're interested or available for new opportunities and getting them over to the recruiting and hiring team. And I'll walk through a little bit more of that in detail. From a screening perspective, if people apply to jobs from anywhere all over the web, she'll be the first point of contact to be able to kind of introduce the company, be an informative touch point for a job seeker, but really enabling every job seeker to have the opportunity to sell themselves for a given role and ask role-specific questions so they can present themselves in the most effective light. And then the last piece is the evaluation piece, where taking that information about that a candidate has, whether it's the resume or application, plus the conversation to help recruiters and hiring managers decide where should we spend most of our time. So that's at a high level, those are the three core capabilities of Wendy. So now I'll go through and start with sourcing. So the way our sourcing product works is we have a few different components. It starts with, we take a job description, we receive that job description from, whether it's an integration with the ATS or right from the career page or whatever that might be. And then we build out, and then we leverage a few different data sources or a few different databases to be able to find candidates that might be a potential fit for that given job. The three different data sources that we tap into, one is our own talent community, which I'll talk to that briefly, but that's kind of like what we call our Wade database. And Wade's just, Wade is actually more candidate focused, but the purpose of Wade is to engage job seekers and learn about them over time to be able to then find out and have an engaged community so that when Wendy is sourcing for a candidate, she has a highly engaged, relevant, and informed candidate pool that she could tap into to deliver candidates to companies. So that's one database. That's our own talent community that we're constantly building. The second one is companies say, hey, I have an ATS with a large existing database of candidates that have been applying for years. Can we reach out to those people and navigate and see who to engage? So that's the second one, is really kind of the re-engagement of your existing database of candidates. And the third, which is generally a replication of how a traditional sourcer or recruiter will go out and find candidates for new jobs, is we go all over the web and through a variety of partnerships and data sources and integrations, we look for people that have profiles that are potentially relevant for this given opportunity that we're sourcing for. And then once we have those lists and those pipelines, what we do is we generate personalized messages that go out to these different individuals. So we build out a pipeline, they enter into a campaign management system, and then we use the different data and data enrichment tools that we've built out to determine how to personalize a message so that this individual will be intrigued enough to want to engage and have a conversation about that opportunity. And we actually have an algorithm that looks at the different data points that we have about a person from the public web to be able to then say, hey, this data point, when used in your personalized messaging, will have the best likelihood to convert someone to a conversation. And then based on how people respond, that system learns over time so that we're constantly training the system to be able to engage people with the right data in the most effective way, because a lot of this is just how, like, what we found today is that a lot of our ability to recruit effectively is not just finding people anymore, because people are, everyone's pretty much profiled all over the web, but it's how effective you can engage. So it starts with the first outreach and then kind of moves forward. So that's kind of the stepping stone. From there, once we sent a personalized message, you'll see actually, if I go back, there's a link on the bottom that says, like, yes, I want to chat. Like, they can actually have a conversation with Wendy about that given opportunity, because, I've received recruiting emails in the past. What happens often is, like, okay, I see the recruiting email, but maybe it's 10 o'clock at night, so I can't call the person, the recruiter, right away and talk about the conversation and let them know I'm interested. So in this opportunity, Wendy's available 24/7 to have a conversation, let you know a little bit more about the role, and go from there. So then we go into a conversational experience. So in this situation, this is actually an example of what we've done for one of our own roles. Is we have it's a very, like, it's a sell conversation. It's all about, hey, I know you're here to learn about the opportunity. We know who you are because we've targeted you and invited you to this chat. And what we do is we take information from both all over from the web about the company and the job, as well as information from the recruiter and hiring manager during the role kickoff experience, to be able to present a kind of more personal, dynamic view of the responsibilities, the qualifications, the insights about the company, images, videos, so that we can have a really engaging experience and the candidate can feel like they had the opportunity to learn more about the role than just what's out there for everybody to find out, which is the job description. We have that conversation. At the end of that conversation, we usually ask someone, is this something you're interested in? Is this a role that you'd like to be considered as an applicant for? And if they say yes, that's when we deliver them to the company. So what are some of the benefits that we're seeing here in terms of there's just the sourcing product alone, is that it's actually a really powerful engagement, a branding engagement platform. So if you think about it, there's different kind of phases to how there's different kind of steps within the funnel where we're actually providing value. The first component is just the outreach perspective. We're building these targeted, directed lead lists for each job that you have available. And what we're finding is that when we put people into campaigns, we're sending them multiple emails. So you're now having, with the click of a button, thousands of people finding out about your company and your opportunity, which is really powerful. To really, we get responses from people that say, hey, this role is not a fit for me right now, but I'm really happy to have heard about this company. I think it's a really exciting business for the space. So when we hear things like that, we know that we're not just tapping into okay, are you going to be an applicant today? But we're getting that we're building that brand awareness. So when they either are looking, or maybe if they're becoming a customer in the future, they're now informed about this company. The second component, which is a little bit of a deeper engagement or interaction, is the conversation. So once they actually see the email and read about the opportunity, that ability to have a personalized back and forth, where if you think about it, every message that's going out is sorry, I was just looking at the questions here on the side. Every message that's going out is a one message at a time focus to be able to really consume what's happening. And in a world where everything, there's distractions everywhere, in chat, you're really only looking at the next message. So it's a really kind of focused attention on what we have to say about this role and company. And we find that to be a really deep opportunity to have a candidate learn about the company and role. From there, our goal is to find out if they're interested, like we were saying, and find out, A, if they weren't interested, why? Can we get them to other roles within the company? Is it the company? Is it the role? And often that gives us a lot of really good feedback to be able to come back to the recruiter and hiring manager and say, hey, we're getting people that are interested, that are clicking into the chat, they're having a conversation. At the end, they're telling us, hey, this is not a fit, and here's why. So a lot of times that comes back with insights around, hey, the role that you're looking for, the role that you're sourcing for is actually not within my, the price range might be off, the comp range might be off, or you'd be getting a lot more candidates if you were opening this up to remote work. So there's a lot of insights from just people saying, hey, I'm not interested and here's why. And the people that are interested, the goal here is to get these candidates that are qualified, that we've given them, we've asked some questions to them, to help filter and help to learn about them throughout that chat, and also know that, hey, these people are not just people that we found on the web, but they've had a conversation, said, yes, I'd like to be submitted for this role. These are interested candidates that we then get into your pipeline, so that the recruiter and hiring manager then can engage. So that's kind of how we approach this whole the sourcing experience. And now I'll move on to the screening product. Screening was the first product we ever released. So this was kind of our initial entrance into the world of training Wendy. And the reason why we started with screening to begin with was when we got started, we realized, hey, we're going to need a lot of conversation, a lot of interactions to help to train Wendy to be able to communicate about about roles, to understand the intents and needs of job seekers, and to be able to build up a substantial data set that we can use to power and expand her knowledge of the language of recruiting. So when it came to screening, to be the first touch point, especially with large organizations that are receiving applicants from all over the web, this was a great place to get that consistent data set. So starting with screening, I'll tell you a little bit about how that works. So what we do is once a new role comes in, which is usually via an integration with their applicant tracking system or CRM, we take the job description, we parse that job description, and then we classify that job description and match it to a few things. One is to a evaluation model. So based on the job description, the topics, the concepts within that job description, our knowledge of that job domain. So we have a broad knowledge base of the various job categories within recruiting. And once we kind of have matched that to that job category, we use the job description to help us zero in and focus within that greater job category. What is it that this company wants to really evaluate and learn about to make sure that they're speaking to qualified candidates? And then the last piece of that is enabling the recruiter or hiring manager to provide feedback and say, hey, this is actually a knockout question for us, or hey, can you put in a couple of these cell data points, like put in our comp information, let them know about our perks and benefits, and here's also some other skills or responsibilities that we'd love to be able to ask about that may not even been listed in the job description, but I realize we're missing. So this gives an opportunity for Wendy to really understand what does the recruiter and hiring manager specifically want to chat about. And that's important because it's really, there's three different pieces here. There's the job description, our knowledge base of the domain, and the recruiter. And what we find often is that in the beginning, the first few times that a recruiter is using Wendy to be a partner on a new job rec, they're very active in giving feedback. And then eventually, as Wendy's learning and they're learning from how Wendy interacts and how she's going to present people back, you start to see less and less feedback from the recruiters and more trust in, hey, Wendy's got this. She's going to ask enough questions to help me make a decision. So there's, what we try to strive for. So I was a recruiter. I spent 5 years in recruiting as actually day-to-day executive recruiter and technology recruiter. And I know that for me, recruiters are underwater no matter what. They're always underwater. It's a 24/7 job, really. And what we want to do is put as little burden on the recruiters as possible so that they can have, Wendy can focus on more task automation instead of just process management, which is, I think, how we've tried to position Wendy as a product. So from there, once we get that that calibration, we go live with roles, and as applicants apply to chat, they're able to, the minute they apply, and there's a variety of different ways that this happens based on how we integrate within a given company's workflow. But the minute that person applies, that's when they usually get invited to kickstart their recruiting process. So if someone applies at 10 o'clock at night, instead of waiting 3 days to hear back and schedule a meeting with the recruiter, Wendy's saying, hey, thanks for applying. Let's actually get to know each other better. Let's jump on a chat right now and have you answer some specific questions that are about that job. That's going to help us to better understand your qualifications for that role, help us better understand some of the unique things about you that make you potentially a fit for this role that may not be on your resume or on your application, and also allow you to learn about the role as well in that process so that you're kind of more and more excited about what you're applying for. From there, we then go into a chat. And those chats can happen across multiple different types of platforms. So, we have our own web and mobile platform that we brand to the client. So, for example, if if someone's applying at Randstad, for example, it'll have Randstad's branding, and this will be Wendy, a recruiting, the AI recruiting partner of Randstad. And she operates as if she's part of the team. And we're a big believer in coming out and saying, hey, we are a machine. We don't pretend to be human. We think there's a lot more advantage to trying to define what a conversation and interaction between machine and humans could be, rather than trying to replicate what a human conversation is and falling short. So, we like the idea of saying, hey, we're a machine, but we're here to help. So it could be on SMS, it could be on web, mobile, even Facebook. So there's a lot of different types of platforms that we can engage. From there, what we do is then we have a role-specific conversation. And that conversation, just to give you a little bit of information, is there's a few really interesting things here. So one, we set expectations up front, we sell the role, we sell the company, then really what we're going into is a dynamic chat. So, we can actually dive deeper into the topics that people respond to. So if we ask someone how many years of experience have they had with a certain programming language, if they say 1 year versus 8 years, our conversation could take can go in a different direction. Because if, let's say the role requires someone to have 4 years, we might have a different chat with someone who's only had 1 year experience than someone who's had 8 years experience. Or if they mention, if we want to learn about what types of programming languages or tools they use. If they mention Python versus Java, versus, a functional programming language, for example, we might have a completely different line of questioning, so we can understand, okay, well, if we're asking you about your, other, object-oriented programming languages that you've used, and you mention a functional programming language, should we find out if you actually want to work more with functional programming languages? So that ability to be dynamic in chat, I think, is the powerful thing that makes chatbots truly personalized. With most applications and websites, user experience, like the UI, the UX, the information, it already exists. If you go to a form, it exists when you get there, and there's nothing you're going to do to change it. But with conversation, every interaction, every message has an opportunity to deliver an experience that's relevant and personalized to the previous interaction, or to the information that we're learning from that previous interaction. So we find that to be really powerful. That's why conversation has been the user experience that we focused on, because we feel like it has the most amount of flexibility for personalized interaction. From there, once we have that chat, we take that data and we combine that with the information that we've used from enrichment services or your resume or your application, and then we want to notify that recruiter or hiring manager saying, hey, you have a new, you have a candidate that's applied. We want to let you know there's a new, this person has reached your qualifications. The way that we qualify people is usually into 3 buckets: ideal, qualified, or did not meet the qualifications. And we want to let them know, hey, you have someone who was ideal for this role. You might want to engage them right away, and here's where you'd be able to go find out more. So now I'm going to move into evaluations. So when it comes to evaluating, what we found really quickly, and it actually goes back to some of our initial pilot engagements when we got started early on. As I said, we started with screening. The first thing we did was said, okay, listen, we have built a conversation system. Let's engage job seekers. Let's demonstrate the power of engagement, personalized engagement at scale. So as we started doing that, we started receiving feedback from the recruiters saying, hey, this is really useful. This is super beneficial. Is there any way that you can help us to determine, of the people that you're engaging, who should we spend our time with first, in what type of priority and type of order? So that was a really great bit of feedback that we learned and gave us our direction as to say, here's the next piece of this puzzle. So that moved us on to evaluations. And what we think about with evaluations is a few things. One, we try to focus on, the first thing is we're a big believer in what we call whitebox algorithms. We want to make sure that there's transparency and insights into why we make decisions. This is not one of those black box situations where, our AI or Wendy is making a decision, you have no idea why, and you just have to trust and listen. So what we do is we use the presentation when she's presenting back a candidate as a reflection of her decision-making process. So if she's saying, hey, this person was an ideal candidate, and here's why. She hit all the different skills you were looking for in this role. She met all the qualifications that you found to be knockouts. In addition to that, we also can show things like additional context to the resume. So instead of just saying this person worked at, for example, Google, she can actually present and say, hey, this person worked at Google, and here's some other attributes. They worked at a 10,000 person company. They worked in the search industry. They worked at a publicly traded company. So there's additional context to what we're finding because of this knowledge graph of information that we've been building over time. So we can give you as much access to information that can help you make an informed decision. Again, Wendy's not here to make the decisions for you. She's only here to make recommendations. She's here to present you insights, present you information, and this is where that tech and touch factor really comes in. It's about that opportunity to be able to say, hey, I want you to have personalized human conversations with the people that you should be spending time with. So let me give you as much information as I can to enable you to direct your time effectively and then have a rich conversation because you have all this new context to be able to speak to them about when you actually do speak to this candidate. So I think that's really powerful. You'll see answers to their questions, which we find that recruiters often, they'll often quote and then send over to the hiring manager as their sell and saying, hey, here's why I want you to spend time with this person. Look how they answered this question. You'll also see there's things like what we call measurables. So if someone says I've worked with Java, for example, or whatever the tool is, we can actually follow up and ask a couple measurables. And those measurables are duration. So how many years have you worked with a given skill or tool? Recency. Have you worked with it in the last 12 months? So those are some things that help us to better understand this person's skill set, experience, and competencies. And then we leave a lot of the human assessment, how well of the cultural type of assessment, the deeper cultural assessment. We give you as much information as you can, and the final decision is yours. But we also are going to show you the same type of thing when we say someone didn't meet the qualifications. We're not just going to dictate and say, hey, this person's not a fit, forget them. Again, you can always follow up, contact these people, engage these people, and say, maybe we're wrong. Maybe this person is a fit and you want to spend time with them. So we're not ruling people out. But what we are going to do is show you why we've said they didn't meet the qualifications. It could be that they didn't meet one of the knockout questions. It could mean that skills that we know are important to you for this role, they express that these are things that they haven't worked with yet. So those are the types of things that we're able to kind of show you to help you understand why Wendy's making the decisions that she is. And then from there, we then present these people to you in our workspace application, where we kind of look at it as a very, again, this is all with the intention to say, how do we put as least amount of responsibility and onus on the recruiter and hiring managing team to do lots of work. We don't want them to spend lots of time. We want Wendy to do the work and you just to make decisions. So the last piece of it is twofold. One, the ability to say, hey, this person's great, let's move them forward, or this person wasn't a fit, let's decline them. What that does is twofold. One, it helps us to facilitate a next step, but the other thing it helps us to do is train the system accordingly. And then from there, once we get that next step, we kind of try to get them back into your workflow as seamlessly as possible. So maybe it's just an email where we choose the recruiter that's going to be leading this next step, or the hiring manager that's going to be leading this next step, a templated message to facilitate the next step. We can incorporate a scheduling link if there's a scheduling tool you use, or if there's some kind of scheduling capability that you want to integrate. And then from there, we get them. We make the introduction, loop them in, and you can take them over from where you normally would. And that's the point, is that we want to be as frictionless as possible. So there's not a ton of change management needed. It's just someone here who's joining your team and doing work, getting tasks completed and handing people over to you. And that's really where the power and benefit is. So some of the other last bit of metrics, I don't want to take too much more time, but you're going to see some of the things that we've been finding that I think are really exciting. One is that about 40% of the chats that have been happening outside of normal work hours. So outside of the 9 to 5, or on weekends, or on holidays, which is kind of reflects that ability to put the candidate first and allow them to speak or engage when it's the right time for them, which is really what we're trying to do by building a recruiting process. Put the candidate first, or put the talent first. Second is that the conversational experience is having a truly high completion rate. When people start chats, they're finishing it. These are things that I think it's, my assumption is that it's really about that dynamic, keeping people's attention from more and more information coming in real time and not being able to see everything, but the curiosity of what comes next. But these chats are, once someone starts, they're usually finishing them. And then on the sourcing side of things, it's like we were talking about, it's a lot about that ability to not have to do that upfront work that takes so long, finding people, writing emails, sending messages. But Wendy's doing that for you, so you're just focusing on interested, qualified candidates you get to spend your time with. So that's me. That's Wade and Wendy. You can follow up with me at drew@wadeandwendy.ai. That's my email address. I'm on Twitter at Drew Austin. If you're a Knicks fan, follow me. But other than that, I'm looking forward to learning more about what you guys are looking for and hopefully being able to answer some questions. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass the ball.
Thank you very much, Drew. I think it was, well, I know that within the limited amount of time, you probably could go on for another hour or so.
Absolutely.
To really go deep. I also saw one of the questions which I think you partially answered already on that last slide. It is, and again, the experience we have with working with you on the technology, it is surprising to see what you had on there, the 90%. I think we have a few cases where it's even higher. The amount of people that when they start the dialogue, the chat, that go through finalizing and make it all the way to the end. I mean, I think that's completely way above any of the standards or the key metrics that we typically see in this space. And it just for us also shows the quality and the depth of the thinking and AI power that sits behind. So thanks very much. Again, in the end, when we have questions, we will spend a few minutes by addressing them, and I'm pretty sure, Drew, there might be one or two questions that will go back to you. So as the next step, I would like to make sure that that I introduce Bill Boyle. So Bill is the Director of Solution Consulting at Montage. He is working there and has a strategic global team that really drives the product roadmaps, the evolutions. He's been with the organization for quite a few years, and again, we are extremely pleased and proud to be one of the key strategic partners with Montage. So jointly, we are applying and leveraging all the features and functions across many of our clients across North America, but also into the other regions like EMEA and APAC. So really pleased to have you with us, Bill. So if you take the honors and guide us through the next topic, I'm pretty sure that's going to be exciting for us all.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. Well, thanks, everybody, for taking some time. I'll keep some of those same themes that Michelle introduced and that Drew talked about. The tech and touch is obviously important. From a Montage perspective, we have always focused on delivering the better candidate experience. The candidate experience for us is paramount. If we look at today's candidates, right? Today's candidates, we live in a mobile-first world. Your candidates are inundated with different technology at every action, whether that's through work, through their personal lives. And because of that type of interaction, they've come to have a higher set of expectations. They expect things that are high-tech and high-touch. They expect transparency. They expect things that are fast and easy. And because of all of those other experiences they have, they want an experience when they go to apply and interview for a job to be the same as when they're interacting with Google or they're interacting with Amazon from more of their commercial or social type of interactions. But we also know that while those expectations exist from a candidate perspective, that a lot of times the traditional recruiting process has fallen short of that. I'm sure that some of you on the phone today have perhaps heard phrases like, this process has taken too long, or my time was disrespected. In fact, recent research from the Talent Board, their Candy research, has shown that when candidates or reported a negative candidate experience going through an interviewing process from a company, that those were the two biggest reasons why they reported a negative candidate experience. And so as we've looked to say, how can Montage and our interviewing technology help address that, we want to keep those things front of mind in how we help create a better candidate experience. And that candidate experience theme, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of our participants today as well, our own recent research from this year has shown from TA leaders that candidate experience continues to be the #1 most important initiative and priority in their talent acquisition environments, making sure that along with those other key aspects around diversity and inclusion, predicting performance, and finding the right fit, but candidate experience continues to be ranked as the single most important experience or priority for those organizations. The Montage solution has been designed to help prioritize that. Our single solution to engage, interview, and hire those better candidates faster, we typically phrase in kind of two different parts. The first is on demand. You can think of this as more of those pre-recorded or asynchronous interactions, something that a recruiter can set up in advance and allow candidates to complete on their own time. Now, while we got our start as a video interviewing company. As we've evolved over time, we've worked with our clients, we understand that video is not always the right fit for every solution, for every type of hire. So we've broadened our platform to be a broader, not just video interviewing, but a broader interviewing technology platform to support those different types of interactions. In some cases, that might be a text interaction, right? In some of the similar ways that Drew was perhaps talking about some of those screening elements, text can be a very effective way, either through SMS or through a web-based chat, to do some of that initial type of screening. For some types of jobs, think perhaps call center or perhaps more blue-collar, high-volume positions where you want candidates to answer more in-depth job or situational questions, but keep the candidate experience as simple as a phone call. Voice can be a great fit. Of course, video is still a key aspect of our questions asked and have candidates respond to that. And we've also incorporated assessments. Now, we're not an assessment company. There is a lot of options out there from an assessment standpoint. Our intention is to complement the kind of the natural alignment that happens between interviewing and assessment, and being able to, from a candidate experience standpoint, deliver a combined interview and assessment experience all within one platform. So we are integrating with different assessment providers. We have a group already in that broadening group over the next year to be able to allow a candidate to perhaps do an on-demand interview, maybe go through and answer 4 or 5 behavioral-based questions, and then in the same experience, click next and take an assessment at that same time, giving the recruiter, giving that hiring manager the benefits of both the interview and the assessment all at one time, simplifying it for the candidate. On the other side of our platform, we have those live interactions, and this is being supportive of any type of live interview that you might have with a candidate, whether that's those initial phone screens. It's a live video interview, and perhaps you're looking to try and avoid initial travel, or even those final in-person interviews. We want to create a better experience around all of those interviews. That starts with scheduling. We have a robust scheduling platform allowing that back and forth to happen either through an AI perspective or even larger event scheduling, being able to take that more administrative task off of the recruiter's plate. But once those interviews are scheduled, being able to have a better experience for everybody involved. For the candidate, that's setting them up for success, helping them prepare for those interviews. And for the interviewer, having more collaboration, feedback mechanisms, things like a digital interview guide and a feedback form inside of that interview experience as well. One of the nice things about what we've done is we've designed this so everything is actually configurable at the individual job level. Now, Montage is also supported by Mira. Mira is the identity for artificial intelligence within our platform, and this interacts in a number of ways. Mira is the Montage Intelligent Recruiting Assistant. This handles, in a lot of ways, thinking about taking more of those administrative tasks away from the recruiters, letting them free up their time to focus on those more strategic activities, focus on the talent, not on the tasks, and help ensure that better experience for candidates, getting back to candidates faster, giving them those quicker interactions, improving that candidate experience. Our goal with this platform is to be able to support 100% of our clients' hires. A lot of times when people initially started looking at what was formerly just video interviewing, it fit perhaps only a certain set of use cases. Now, as we've broadened that platform to incorporate text, incorporate voice, incorporate, of course, scheduling and even some of those in-person interviews, we now really have the power to support every type of hire you do, from perhaps those hourly high-volume roles all the way to the C-suite, making sure that we can create a similar type of interviewing experience for every type of interview for every type of job. Now, one of the things that we really know as we think about those different types of jobs is that your recruiting needs, the recruiting process that you have, is going to vary for those individual jobs. And we want to give and make sure that our clients, those recruiters, have a way to be able to build out that experience to what is right for the job. So as they design out these jobs, these templates that can be used, and a lot of this is triggered in we've designed our entire platform to be complementary to the core system, the applicant tracking system, or a CRM, so that perhaps as you open up a new requisition, you can simply select a template that you already have in Montage. And that template's not just here's one set of questions. It's guiding the entire interview process for that job, You can see here an example of a job where we have 4 different interview stages. We might be doing a pre-screening via on-demand video, maybe then a conversation with the recruiter, an initial conversation with the manager, followed by perhaps some finalist interviews that are happening in person. But the nice thing here is the recruiters can build out those interview stages and even decide, again, if we think about those administrative tasks that go along with this, how candidates advance through those stages. So we can leverage that AI in some ways to be able to say, listen, if we see that candidates answer questions a certain way on their interview, or perhaps we get a certain amount of feedback on that interview, we want to automatically move that candidate to the next stage. So that could be something, you know, a candidate that answers questions a certain way, or perhaps if there's an assessment involved, scores a certain level on that assessment, not having to wait for the recruiter to go in, look at that, and take the next action, but advancing that. Or maybe saying if the manager says they like this candidate, being able to have the system decide to go through and take that and invite that candidate to schedule, not waiting for a manual interaction from the recruiter to do those things. Of course, you can build out for each of these stages the right type of experience, different branding per stage, the questions and review types that you need at that individual stage to really streamline that candidate experience. And we, of course, help you track all of that information as candidates advance, right? When we talk about now that you have that job set up, what does that mean for the candidate? Of course, that experience is going to vary depending on what the type of interaction that you've set up is. Those different types of on-demand interactions are all going to vary. In some cases where you have perhaps more of that text type of interaction, this is going to allow perhaps that chatbot to reach out to ask some of those initial screening questions to your candidates. This could be through SMS, it could be through more of a web-based chat as well, maybe having some of those initial questions. Now, the candidate's still going to be able to interact, so if they get a text from a number they don't know, asking how long is this going to take, you know, Amira is going to be able to respond, answer those questions, guide them back to agreeing to answer the questions. You know, in this format, it is something where more of those qualification knockout questions, if you will, work well. Think high volume positions where maybe I'm trying to do things like check on eligibility to work, I'm trying to check on shift preference. Those are things that candidates can quickly answer. As they answer those questions, we know what the ideal profile looks like for that. That's part of what you can set up in the job. So we can actually say, you know, if they've answered those questions the right way, again, from an automation standpoint, we can even say at the end of their interview, we could immediately prompt them if they answer the questions fitting our ideal profile to take a next action. That next action could be going through and completing another more in-depth on-demand voice or video interview, or the example that I have here is a candidate saying, you know what, we actually want to move you into scheduling, so click here and pick a time to talk to that recruiter, right? So with a couple simple text messages back and forth, clicking on a link, that candidate now has their interview scheduled, a very simple candidate interaction. In other types of examples where it's not text, we're always at the first part of the interaction going to take the candidate to some type of branded interview foyer. The design, the intention of these foyers is to give you a chance to promote your employer brand. Being able to have these branded, this could even be branded for different parts of the business, different types of job. Even as a candidate progresses through the interview process, they might see different branding at every stage of the interview process. More information about the job, more information about the culture, being able to share different types of videos, even having messages from the recruiter or the manager talking about their ideal fit for the job, having kind of those day in the life or those realistic job preview videos that you can present to candidates. So while these are actions that a candidate is taking on their own time, you have the power to still make sure you're treating it like a two-way interaction, giving them time and giving them the ability to learn more as they go through this process. You know, for different types of on-demand interactions, that might be where a candidate who you have set up to go through an on-demand video interview, they're answering those questions on their own time. You can have a variety of different types of interactions there. So different types of questions, maybe it's a video or an audio question. You have different types of responses. And of course, we give a lot of flexibility for you to control what that candidate experience is. Do they have the option to re-record their answers or not? Do they have the ability to, you know, only have a certain amount of time? You can control all of those actions. Here, as a candidate goes through and answers a couple questions, perhaps in an on-demand video interview, Again, if we're trying to create that streamlined experience, it might be that as they go through and they answer a couple questions and then immediately get launched into some type of assessment. Again, we're leveraging a third-party assessment in this example, but one where the candidate doesn't realize they're interacting with two different types of technologies. They're simply going through their interview. They answered a couple questions. Now they're taking a quick assessment, and as they finish that, right, the recruiter gets the benefits of both of those things back delivered to them. Right? That also holds true when we get past those initial interviews into scheduling. Right? From a scheduling standpoint, we want to make sure that candidates are put in the driver's seat where they have the ability to pick the time that works well for them. Again, this can be driven through SMS, it can be driven through email and a link, and support any type of scheduling. So even if we just want to streamline having our phone interview scheduled or in-person interviews scheduled, we have a transportation company that schedules hundreds of thousands of candidates for distribution centers, of about 700 distribution centers around the world, to be able to see that information and streamline the candidates to have a very simple schedule where they might get a text or offered a couple simple times to schedule, have still a back and forth, right? So here the candidate was offered times. They asked that they could do the time on Wednesday. Mira's smart enough to realize there was two offerings that we gave them, so we clarify which one, and then that interview is scheduled. The candidate still gets a personal back and forth type of interaction, but it's not the recruiter or the coordinator having to take that time, that back and forth, the combining of calendars to do that and allowing that power to go into the candidate and those interviews be scheduled. Now, one of the other ways that we've really looked to see how can interviewing technology help to streamline the process, one of the things that, again, looking at some of those key initiatives, knowing that diversity and inclusion, knowing that reducing bias is a key theme across talent acquisition, this is an area we've always focused on. Historically, through both our on-demand and our live interviews, we've actually been able to help keep our clients more compliant. We make sure that candidates that are going through any type of interview process, we present them the same type of experience. We have, and you have documentation and evidence that every candidate was asked the exact same question. They were given the same opportunities to respond. We can help you provide consistent rating and feedback mechanisms, of course, presenting all of those disclaimers and things that are important, but we've also been looking at how does it take the next step in terms of helping to control, reduce bias through that framework. And as we've looked at that, we know that it's impossible to completely remove bias. We all are subject to bias. There's so many different inputs that we get on a daily basis. We can only process a certain part of them. So that unconscious bias, as much as we might not want it to, it seeps in. Those things that are in our own background, our own culture, our environments can all have an impact on how we look at a candidate, what we see on their resume, what they say during an interview, how they say something during an interview, how a candidate looks. Those are all things that can seep in. So we really wanted to look to how can we help reduce that through the process. So one of the ways that we're leveraging technology here is being able to say a candidate is going to go through that on-demand interview. The candidate experience I just talked about is not going to change at all. They're going to go through, complete a voice or a video interview, learn more about the company through that, and they're going to submit their interview. But when it's time for that review to happen, when it's time for, let's say, a hiring manager to now consume those interviews, one of the things we can do is we can help introduce more of that unbiased review. So what we're going to do here is we're leveraging AI from a voice-to-text perspective to transcribe the audio from that candidate's interview. So we're going to transcribe that audio. We will present that back to the reviewer as both a transcript of what the candidate said, as well as a chance to listen to that candidate's response. But the voice of their response is AI as well. So imagine that this is Alexa or Siri that's reading the answer back. So you might review 5 candidates, but as you're listening to their responses, they all sound identical. So I now do not know if this is male or female. I don't know if that person had an accent. I can choose whether I want to listen or I want to just read. And then I have to provide my feedback on that candidate based off of now just the content of their answer. So I can rate those individual responses. as I rate those responses, I have to then make a decision of, based off of the content of that answer, do I want to move this candidate forward or not? Only after I make that decision, yes or no, only then am I actually going to see the candidate's information. That's when I see their name. I can see their image. I can even see their actual responses. So now I'll see the video that candidate recorded. I could go back and I could watch that video. But I'm only able to do that after I have made a decision, made my rating based off of the content of their response. So this is going to, again, we can't reduce the bias, but we can help control where it might occur within the process. So focusing and forcing a reviewer to focus on just the content of a response and not anything else about it in the process. So this is something that, as we know that there's a continuous raise of concern, and this is a concern that's been around how does perhaps a recorded voice or video interview earlier in the process might impact this. Where there are those points of concern, we can introduce this type of review to help mitigate that as well. Now, those are a couple key aspects of our platform. Of course, as we could spend more time, I'm sure for those of you that are interested, here is my contact information. I'm happy to answer additional questions or set up more time to talk about your individual use cases and how any type of those interviews could fit into our platform. But hopefully this was helpful in looking at some of those ways that, from an automation standpoint, again, how can you leverage automation robots to be able to streamline that candidate experience and support 100% of your interviews. Hopefully this was helpful in that regard.
Thank you very much, Bill. It was again very helpful and insightful to also see the richness of the technology suite and all the different areas. I think specifically what you end up in the last part also around making sure that the buyers are creating an unbiased setup is one of the key features and one of the key things that we see popping up in many more discussions and requests and needs the clients have. If I go to one of the questions that followed through on the Q&A, and I think it's a question probably applicable for both of you, that has to do with, let's say, people that are for the first time are getting confronted with the invites to go into the communication engagements. What's your experience? What are the lessons learned when you think about things like adoption and people that drop out or continue through that end-to-end cycle and in essence finish and go through the end to the full workflow? Bill, any experience from your end on that piece?
Yeah, we see great adoption through that, and I think that part of it depends on how the communication happens, where within the process it happens. And I saw there was a question here around how we make sure that it's also something that's perhaps not a scam and that this is tied to a real opportunity. And for us, that's where we really work to, again, connect this back to the experience with the CRM or the applicant tracking system so that through automation with that, a candidate might be getting one of those first messages within perhaps a few minutes after they've applied. So it's not something that I'm getting a message out of the blue asking about interest and, hey, are you interested in this job? It's based off an action the candidate took, right? And we even have some design put in so that if we get and we still get a question, especially if we're texting a candidate, it's not uncommon to still get some type of question around who is this? And we have ways that we answer that to clarify that, right, we're a virtual assistant for the recruiter or for this company to be able to streamline that experience and not confuse the candidate.
Yeah, and Drew, any comments from your end?
Yeah, I think that what we found is that one of the telling things that I've kind of experienced as people go through the process is that people want to have the opportunity to sell themselves. They want to be heard. They want to feel listened to. So, what we strive for is to demonstrate that listening, that understanding through the conversation. And then the thing that I've always found really nice and interesting is that at the end of these conversations, they're going through, an application or traditional recruiting process. They're thanking Wendy at the end of the conversation. They're saying, thanks for listening. So, not very often are you seeing people thank applicant tracking systems, but they're humanizing the experience themselves, actually appreciating the opportunity to be able to answer questions that are specific to the role, be able to present themselves in the most effective light so they feel like they're giving the best opportunity to be able to land that job and not just fall into the black hole. So that's kind of how I've seen it. I think the other component is that we do, like I was saying earlier, we try to be very upfront with that we are a machine, but we're here to support the humans. And that's kind of another thing that I think is we don't try to pretend we're human and deceive. I think that's really important as well because, it's very important to build trust. We're building trust in, it's important for the company to build trust in us. For the candidate to build trust in us, and to do that, we have to be really upfront. So, we're seeing a really great response rate. I guess one other thing I would say is that it's also, there's a really big carrot at the end of the stick with our process. So if you think about most chatbots that I've ever seen that have existed, chatbots come in all shapes and sizes for all different industries, but very few are placed in a position where they're helping you find a job that's going to support your family and grow your life. So I think that people are much more inclined to follow through with the experience that's in front of them, and go through the process. That's why I think we have a really good impact on adoption.
Perfect. Fully agree. It's again, also looking at the timing, I want to take a minute to close off the session. First of all, I would really like to thank Drew and Bill for joining and spending time with us to really demonstrate how AI and automation is really able to increase not only access but also the speed to connect and to engage with talent and candidates, and at the same time really drive this tech and touch joint endeavor to maximize the value for our clients, but also for sure on the candidates. For everybody also that joined in our talent navigation webinar today, very appreciate your time to be with us. I hope you picked up a number of items. Both Drew and Bill have shared their contact details, and for sure, if you can also reach out to anybody within the Randstad Sourceright organization to engage in any of these discussions, more than happy to facilitate. As we have been recording, we also will share the PDF versions of the slide material, and that will be coming out to you soon. So from my end, as being helping to facilitate and moderate the session, again, a big thank you all for today. I wish you all a tremendous, beautiful remainder of the day, and hope to see and speak to you soon in any of our upcoming new webinar sessions, probably at the beginning of next year. So thank you very much, and looking forward to speak soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.